Hi, I'm Soren Bjornstad, and welcome to this video about my personal abbreviation system. So, little discussion of the motivation for this video and kind of what I'm hoping to accomplish. In anticipation of doing a few more of these educational videos on TiddlyWiki and information management and all that kind of stuff, I got a tablet and I'm trying to set up so I can do kind of chalk talk components of those where they would be helpful. And so I just thought I would put something out there as a kind of a way to familiarize myself with that and maybe have a little bit of fun along the way. So like I said, I'm going to talk about my abbreviation system. I don't have any immediate plans to put more stuff out about it, but it is something I would like to put on the internet in the future. So be patient, I guess. Let me know if you're interested in it, and maybe we'll see what we can do. Sorry, I shouldn't be multitasking here. I apparently can't spell abbreviation when I'm trying to talk at the same time. So, what's the motivation for this system? I write a lot. A lot of it's on the computer. Type about 120 words per minute. Use the Dvorak keyboard layout for that. But I also write by hand quite a bit. I like it. I write with fountain pens. I've dabbled in calligraphy before. I'm not really very good at it, but I try to pay attention. I do a lot of my rough thinking on paper, often on index cards or in small notebooks. This will become important in a minute. I have done handwritten journals at many times in the past and kind of do that on and off as well. So if you're anything like me, when you do a lot of something, you start to wonder how you can make it more efficient, right? So even if the amount by which you can make it efficient isn't that much, if you're doing it a lot, any small gains you get start to add up. And so, if you're writing thousands of words on paper every week, even if you can get a 10% efficiency gain out of that, that can start to add up to a lot, enough to make it worth considering what you can do. Furthermore, I just think it's kind of fun to optimize stuff like this. So, win-win situation, right? Another thing is just size. Because I do like writing on index cards and small stuff like that, you can get more stuff on an index card, obviously, if what you're writing is smaller, and that makes life easier because you don't have to have so many index cards. So you kind of get a double efficiency gain, right? You get increased speed, and you get the ability to fit more on the same amount of space. So I kind of started exploring this in high school, maybe. So it's probably been about 8 years since the real introduction of this system, and pieces of it have developed over time since then. So I believe there are 5 kind of components to it. So let's talk about each of those. So the first one is called Dutton Speedwords. You will find some stuff about this online. There's not a lot about it. The print resource is out of print. Some people have put some parts of that online, though. And I actually printed a dictionary of my own based on one of those sites. I don't believe it's public anywhere. I think it may be out of copyright, and if it is, I might consider putting that up at some point in the future. But you can probably find it if you look around and you're really interested. So this is an alphabetic shorthand system, so it's unlike, say, Greg or what's the other kind of shorthand that's really common? Is it Pimsleur? It starts with a P. In that it doesn't use any of its own characters. It just uses the normal letters. So that means you can also type it on a typewriter at the time or on a computer now. Because I type so fast, I hardly ever do this, but it's kind of handy to have that option. It also means you don't have to learn any complicated new systems. It is actually also an international auxiliary language, so Esperanto is the best known version of that, where the idea is that everyone would learn some simplified artificial language and then they would be able to communicate with people who didn't share their native language without having to learn some other complicated natural language. This idea never really caught on, and now we kind of have English as that. But that was the idea, so it's kind of a fun historical artifact to see that maybe you might call it unwarranted optimism there. But in theory, you can use it as a full language. I tend to use it a little more roughly in a way that wouldn't pass muster necessarily with other people trying to speak an auxiliary language with me. But, you can kind of step up your game a little bit if you want to do that. I don't know why you would, since you probably meet about, like, a quarter of a person in your entire life, even if you go around looking for them, who would actually be able to speak it with you, but hey. There is also some extensions. So extensions to Dutton Speedwords. I'll call that DSW. You also sometimes see it called Motes, because that's how you would say it in the language itself. That should say extensions, not extension. So I have borrowed from Ron and Marty Hale Evans. I guess it's Ron. It's their book Mind Hacker, but I think it's Ron's system, called Speedwords Correlatives. Speedwords Correlatives. So this is just a way of making correlative phrases easier. These are things like where, what, why, sometime, wherever, those kinds of words. Those are often kind of ugly and irregular, and this is a beautiful regular system that lets you say even things that you can't say in English. I also have ways of marking off contractions, and then just also some kind of, like, I'll call it personal weirdness. There's some forms that I use that are not standard that I've just gotten used to using for whatever reason, because I didn't like the original or whatever. Another thing is, I call it Greekening. So the reason it's called Greekening is because it involves using Greek letters. And the idea is that there are common morphemes or sequences of syllables. It is broken up phonetically, but you can kind of approximate it with a sequence of letters too if you like, that occur very frequently and are long to write out. So for instance, ing, right, or ship, or trance. So these kinds of things in English, and those can get kind of annoying sometimes to write out. So I replace these with Greek letters that have some phonological similarity. So these are just a couple of them, but so the tau is the Greek equivalent of T, right? The pi is of P, and the gamma is G. So there's kind of a slight mnemonic to it, but mostly I've just gotten used to that's how that works. There is also, I call these swashes. So these are actually special characters that I made up that are used for some things. So for instance, they're just common words that in all of my other systems are kind of awkward to write. Should, actual, or actually. And so these look like that. And these are designed to be pretty easy to write in just a couple strokes and be easily distinguishable from anything else. So I don't want to be confusing with letters or something. And then the last thing is just, I'll call them standard abbreviations. So these would be just arbitrary abbreviations that I make up and use consistently. So for instance, there's IN. I guess I've swapped the order of these. Let's do it consistently with my other examples here. So we'll have the internet. One of the problems with Dutton Speedwords now is that it came out before any of the tech stuff, so there's not really any words for tech stuff in it, and they're kind of hard to form. So that's IN, or what are some other ones? I often use write in any of its forms as RT. I have a series of names that I frequently write as abbreviations. So like, Frank. I know a couple people named Frank, so I've come to normally write that FRK with a period at the end. So I've got a lot of these. I actually have a card file of them for the ones that I'm worried I'm going to forget. So that just kind of fills in many of the gaps here. I guess there is one other piece that I could add, which would be ad-hoc abbreviations. So the difference between these and standard abbreviations would be that I make them up on the spot. So they're not consistently used, They would be within a specific text. And, the challenge with those is that you might forget what they refer to, but the benefit is that you have a very... If you know it's an ad hoc abbreviation, as I do because I know all my other abbreviations pretty well, you know that it clearly refers to something that is specific to that text. And so you can have even something, sometimes I might write like, T period, and I would know that means technology, just because I was using the word technology a whole bunch in that sentence. So that also serves... That's also useful if you have a proper noun that keeps coming up that's really long to write out. And I'm sure most people have done ad hoc abbreviations in their lifetime before, so that's probably not a concept that I need to go into great detail on, right? So that is kind of the whole system and all of its pieces. It's definitely still evolving, and I come up with new components of most of these all the time. I came up with a new Greekening letter a while ago. I can't remember what it was now, but they're the components. Let's try actually writing something out and see what that looks like. So I kind of ended up putting this in a bizarre spot on my canvas here, so I'm just gonna, let's see, how do I extend to the bottom? I can't remember. Expand canvas, down, Control K, there we go. Just add a bunch more space here so we don't run out. All right, I'll stuff a line on here. And I got a couple of quotes ready that we can look off of here. So we can start with this top one. This is Carl Sagan talking about how awesome books are. It's kind of fun. So my pronunciation of Dutton Speedwords is not always completely canonical. I'm actually working on trying to improve it slightly because I'm fairly inconsistent about it. But I'm going to pronounce kind of what it sounds like in my head, because I think that's kind of handy to know, because abbreviations are often kind of unpronounceable, but it definitely flows nicer if you can figure out how to say them. So this is this top quote over here that I'm going to be writing out. Quam u astonishing ubu a. Te u flat obj mod de u bo flexible parts o qua a imprinted ood the funny, let's say, lumo squiggles. One voot at et ve inglat the men de wo pie or cour. That's not there. I made that word up. Beaks fro thousands de an. Across le senes, we'll say, urist a uspe, we don't even need the a, pelk, let me rewrite that, that's really hard to read. Pelk at aux inglat v ka dirk av uri a pa gu, my gue, de whom inventions, binding ge ers kur azo, let's say I saw ye ot, citizens de Nikes epochs booze roop le shackles de te ubu a pru ka humas, pardon, a capable de ura magic. So, apologies for my slow handwriting on the tablet. I'm still kind of trying to get the hang of it, and I got a cramp there, so there's that. But, so that gives you an idea of kind of, obviously, what that looks like and what it's like to write out there. I would write a little bit faster on paper with a pen that I'm more used to. I can usually write about 30 words per minute longhand, and I would be writing in cursive normally on paper, too. I don't want you to see my cursive tablet handwriting because there's no way you'd be able to read it, but it's a lot neater on paper. So about 30 words per minute complete longhand, but about 50 words per minute when I use the abbreviation system. So that's obviously a substantial improvement, more than a third faster. So when you're writing a lot, that adds up quite a bit. And it takes up a little more than half the space, but a fairly similar improvement in space consumption, which makes sense because the speed of your handwriting is about equal to how many letters you have to form. So I think a useful exercise here would be to go through and mark off what components of that abbreviation system that I've used on each line. So let me see if I can get the zoom set nicely here so that we can actually see both of them. Ideally, I would also still be able to see everything. Here, I'll just squash this over a little bit. There, that'll do. So I'm going to let me put a color next to each of these. So we'll do blue for Speedwords, purple for extensions, orange for Greekening, and I'll call this, we might expand this to just, I'm going to call it, well, that's all right. We don't have any swashes in this one. I'll put a red with it, but we don't have any. Did I actually select that? There we go. Standard abbreviations, we'll do green, and ad-hoc will do yellow. I don't think I have any ad-hocs in this one either. Okay, so I'm just going to come out here and select and change the color of these as we go. So quum is a Speedwords extension. That is a correlative for what. Then we move on to Speedwords here, which means the indefinite article. Astonishing, this is Greekened with the gamma meaning ing. Ubu a, meaning thing a book is. That is Speedwords, straight Speedwords. This is a Speedwords extension because it is a contraction. So in Speedwords proper, there are no contractions at all. But when I'm transcribing quotes or things people say, sometimes I want to be a little bit more accurate of a translator. So because Speedwords really is kind of a different language, if you try to put everything in Speedwords, you're not always going to get the exact words of the author. In many cases, that doesn't matter, especially if you're writing yourself. But if you are trying to transcribe a quote and you want most of the words to be right, sometimes you have to use a little care to make sure that you put it down. And so what I do to differentiate between contractions and non-contractions is if it's a contraction, the second word of the contraction, like, is or are or whatever would form the part after the apostrophe, I turn into a superscript, putting it above the baseline. So this means it apostrophe s because the e is raised. If it were te separate words, it would mean it is. But those are both speed words still. There's oo again. Object here is obj. That is a standard abbreviation of mine. Flat, I'm going to leave black because that's just a standard English word that I didn't abbreviate at all here. Mod de ubol, meaning made of a tree with. Standard speed words. Flexible, Greekened. O qua a, on which is, imprinted, standard English. Ud, many of is literally what that means. Lots of, I think, is what was originally in the text. Yeah, lots of. So, you can kind of tell, even if literally translated, it doesn't come across to what was in the original. I'm often able to figure out exactly what words the author used. So even if I am actually changing it into speed words. Funny. I'm going to mark this as Greek, and it doesn't actually contain any Greek letters, but it's part of the same sort of system. This line above the letter is called a macron. This long predates me. Was used as a scribal abbreviation in Latin. People often used it when writing handwritten letters that were in limited space back when people did that. So that just means there's double N because it's easier to draw a line than to write the letter again. Lumo, speed words, dark. Squiggles, you'll notice I could have done a macron there, but I didn't. I missed it as I was writing and didn't want to go back and fix it. I noticed at the time. But one... glance at it, and speed words, your speed words extension, U apostrophe RE, that is your, I pronounced it kind of wrong. Inglat, lemen de uo pie beaks fro thousands de n. Long speed words run there. That's all gonna be blue. Across the, didn't mean to rescale that. Across the chenes, urist uspe pelk et ox. Also, still all speed words. Inglat via ka, dirk av. I think I forgot to translate the last one. Across the millennia, an author is speaking clearly and silently inside your head, directly to you. Writing is uri e pie le mai gue de. Writing is maybe the greatest of. Human. Inventions is Greekened. Don't know the speed word for invention. Binding, same deal. Ge ers kur azo Isa J. Olt. Together, people who never knew each other. Citizens, English. De Nikes, speed words of distant. Epics, English. Booze, ruple, books break the. So shackles I wrote out in English. I don't know what the speed word would be anyway, but I would have written it out anyway because books break the shackles of time. The shackles is kind of a turn of phrase that really matters in that case. And if I put it into speed words, I'd be worried about accidentally substituting in chains or bonds or whatever it might be. So since this is a quote, I'd want to make sure that I preserve that word. Te ubu a, that is speed words. Pru is a standard abbreviation for proof that I use. I think there's a speed word for it, but I've never used it. I don't know why. I just like my abbreviation better, I guess. Kahums a, that humans are. Capable, Greekened. Daura, of working, and magic at the bottom. So there's the colorized version. You can see that there are only a handful of words that we did not actually abbreviate at all. So, there is flat imprinted. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words that didn't get abbreviated at all. And how many words are there here? Looks like 200 words down there. So 9 out of 100, almost all the words were abbreviated in some way. There's pretty heavy use of Speedwords here, and a few Greek-end words, and then just 2 of the standard abbreviations. No ad-hoc abbreviations, no swashes in this one. Is just kind of how it turned out. So, the more common the words are and kind of standard the language is, the more Speedwords I usually end up using, because, it's a language. You have to memorize those words. Although not entirely, because Speedwords has some cool regular formation stuff, which I'll talk about in a second here, actually. But, the more words that you're writing that you know and that you frequently encounter, the more Speedwords you're going to be able to write, for sure. So, yeah, let's actually look through those Speedwords and see kind of how this works. So, what we just talked about, this is a correlative. So, let's see how the correlatives work. So, correlatives are composed of 2 parts. So, there's 1 letter for each. So, the beginning is a question word. So, it'll be like what, where, it's not a question word necessarily. It would be, it's completely wrong. It's late here. It would be something like what, every, any, no. So it's more of a qualifier. And then the second half of it is like a thing or a target. So there's thing, place, time, reason, and so on. There are like 7 or 8 of each, probably. And so the prefixes for these would be like Q, J, JJ, which is actually not standard in the Speedwords Correlatives. I added that one myself. N, and then M, P, Z, Y. And these letters are kind of chosen to fit in with the rest of Speedwords. So, for instance, the standard way to do a substantive, which makes something into a noun, is to add an M to the end of it. So, and the Y is very frequently used for causative or causes, so or reasons. So these are not random letters. They do make sense in the context of Speedwords, so they're pretty easy to remember. But so you can freely combine these any way you want. So, I can say anytime, any place, anything. It could transcribe in English any place or an anywhere. It's kind of up to you. Any reason, and you can do things that you couldn't do in English. So you could say any when, right? JJZ. In English, you'd probably have to say at any time, but you can just make it into that nice little 2-letter word in Speedwords. As we move right along, you is just the indefinite article, a or an. There's no difference in form in Speedwords. Thing, we're seeing that again. The most common words are the shortest in Speedwords, so E is to be. Again, it's totally regular, so is, am, are. All of those are the same, just one E. The past tense is different for E. It's just the letter Y. And that is slightly irregular because all other words except to be have a regular past tense in Speedwords. But it's just so common that saving an extra letter on that over how you would need to make it past tense otherwise is very helpful. Again, this is it is. I mentioned how that contraction works earlier. Here's where we're going to see our first compound or word with affixes on it. So they're both prefixes and suffixes, and there's a regular system of lots of them. There's probably about 20 or so. And so in this case, the root is ma for make, and then the D makes it into past tense, specifically past participle, made, having been made. The object has been made from a tree. So there's your past. There's also a simple past, which would be ima, which is written yma, so that's a prefix y for that. I tend to use those fairly interchangeably in most cases because oftentimes English uses the same thing, right? So, he makes, he made, he has made, right? So the mades are the same. So for an native English speaker, it's actually sometimes kind of hard to tell which one you're using when you're just flipping through it. Obviously, if I stop and think about it, I can tell which one it should be, but I don't really want to have to stop and think about grammar while I'm writing abbreviations. So I tend to actually lean towards the past participle just because it matches English's patterns more with a D on the end. English doesn't have anywhere where you make something a past tense by prefixing a Y onto it. But sometimes I do make that distinction. These are, again, just little words, with, M, which, QU. Here's another interesting one. So this is lumo, meaning dark. Lum means light. O is the opposite, so it turns it into dark. O is a little interesting because there's three of these. There's also the causative and what's the other one? The association suffixes that have both a consonant and a vowel form. So there's also a version where it's X, but because it's really hard to say lumix, if the letter before it is a consonant, you use the O, and if the letter is a vowel, you use the X. And we'll see one of the X's later on here. Vut, so vu means look. T is the diminutive, so that makes it smaller. So in this case, that turns it into a glance. And if you look up in a Speedwords dictionary, you will probably see glance. They might have another word that means something similar in there for voot. But because these are so regular, you can kind of just make them up on the spot and expect them to work. So I especially really like the augmentative and diminutive suffixes. Augmentative is the opposite. It makes it larger. They often make it possible to form interesting new words, even sometimes in ways that you can't do in other languages. Here's a new thing that we haven't seen before. This is actually a compound word. It's pronounced inglat. The doesn't show up in the word, but it indicates that that's like where there's a boundary of morpheme. So I is in, and lat is side, so together that means inside. Here's another one. This is actually a contraction. P is may, and et is to be, so together that means maybe. Here's the X that goes with the O. So B is life, Bix is death, or in this case, dead. In context, you can easily tell the difference. We would have the option if we actually, side note, if we wanted to make very clear that it was death. In this case, it wouldn't make any sense. Maybe someone death for thousands of years. But we would have the option to throw on that -m suffix that I was talking about, which would be the substantive. So we would be able to say bixm, or we might say bimx. I don't think there's actually a rule on what order you put those on in. And so that would make it death rather than dead for sure. An means year or years. The plural would be with a Z, but we don't use the Z here because in context we already know it's plural because there's a number in front of it. If it were maybe someone dead for years without the thousands, then we would need to use that Z just as a matter of grammar. You probably could figure it out without in English because you would always use that indefinite article. If you were saying somebody dead for a year, you would not say somebody dead for a year. But without the plural, if you drop a letter somewhere, a minor mistake could suddenly change the meaning of the sentence. So it is kind of helpful to have that Z if you don't have a number. If you do have a number, it's not necessary, as I didn't use it here. Chenes, this is interesting because I kind of made it up. Technically, sen is 100, a is the augmentative, so that would be 1,000 is just kind of the natural next step up from 100, right? And then z is the plural. But so what this literally means is across the thousands. I don't know if there's an official word for millennia in Speedwords. One thing we could say would be, right, Anning Chenez. So that would be a compound with year, 1,000 year. In this case, across the thousands doesn't make sense, and it's very obvious that what I mean is thousands of years because the word thousands of years just came up, so I just wrote that. You can kind of just make things up when you're abbreviating like that. This one is a compound here. Re is to write, and st is a professional. Like the ist, like dentist, or what's another example that does that in English? You can probably think of one. I can't think of one for some reason now when I'm on the spot. But so this means a person who writes, or an author. You might also say writer like that. The is also a person, but it. I like this here because it's more of a profession than just like a person currently doing something. Uspe, so spe is speak, and makes it continuous. So speaking is speaking. I wrote the e, which in English you would have that as a helping verb. Is speaking. You don't need that in Speedwords. I often write it just because I'm in the habit, and it's kind of the way that when I'm mixing Speedwords in English, I naturally put it in there, but you don't need it. The K is another suffix, so this is clear, clearly. K makes it into an adverb. Here's that opposite again. Ow is hear or sound. I guess it's hear, it's not sound. The san is sound. But this would be the opposite of hear, so silent. I guess you might be able to interpret that as deaf, but I think it's pretty clear here. Sano actually might make a little more sense there. Ilat again, we already talked about that. Here's this adverb again, directly instead of just direct for dir. Here's the U again, uri, writing rather than just write. We might also say actually rim. So this would be write with a substantive. So that might actually be more semantically correct. Because it's not exactly a participle. It's not like somebody is doing the writing. We're talking about the concept of writing, like things that have been written down. So ream would probably actually be more accurate there. Here's another fun one. It uses both a prefix and a suffix. So gu is good, gue is great, and mai is the superlative prefix. So that means greatest. You can just kind of shove stuff together like that frequently. Here's another O, as is ever, as O is never. And here's another plural too. Is person, ers is people. Here's another correlative, right? So we can add one up here. Person, or one, and that would be -r. -r. So now we can see QR is what person, who, in other words, who. Here's one where I use the I saw, so instead of the D at the end, this makes the simple past new. If I said sod, it would be people who never known each other, so it's more accurate that way. Nikes, here's yet another use of that opposite. So near, opposite of near is far or distant in this case. I know it's distant rather than far because citizens of far epochs doesn't make any sense. So again, if you are worried about getting the author's exact words back, it's worth thinking about that as you write, and obviously you can just jump back into English if you're worried that you won't get it. Books break. I don't think there's anything else super. Here's another. This is work with that participle again, so working, magic. So I was maybe going to do another one, but I see we're already at 40 minutes, so that was kind of, I think that has demonstrated most of what I wanted to show, so, let me know if you're interested in seeing more of this, and maybe I'll do more of it later, and there's definitely some resources that would be helpful if you're interested in kind of getting started with this. But also, I think part of the fun of doing a personal abbreviation system, right, is that, well, it's personal, so you're certainly going to always be the one making up your ad hoc abbreviations, and your standard abbreviations, because those are specific to what you write that other people might not write. But, don't just grab my Greekening and Swashes necessarily, unless you really want to. Think about, what words are the way I came up with the words to put in the Swashes, right? Whereas I was writing these words a lot, and I was irritated by how hard it was to write them. So then I came up with some forms that I could use to write them faster. So ideally, your system should be based on what you find yourself writing rather than what somebody else found, because you are going to get better results that way. I think that is it for now. Thank you.